Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Epic Podcast with me, Edric. Now, I've got Nick over here, who is the co-founder and CEO of IMPLS Entertainment. Now, for those of you who do not know, they are the top team, all right, known as Paper Rex. And, man, IMPLS Entertainment has moved from strength to strength, and now you're developing that team so strongly. And just a quick background. Now, you and I were supposed to do this in like July.
Yeah, we've been talking for a while.
Yeah, correct. And at the end of the day, the reason why, and which is good news, right? That we didn't do it in July is because you guys won a tournament.
We're too busy winning stuff. That's right.
At Paper X, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us a bit more about Paper X. I mean, this is a whole esports thing that you're focused very much on. Was it CS or is it Valorant now?
It's Valorant, yeah. Valorant is the main title that the team plays. It's the only game that we as Paper X play at the moment as well. So a little bit of background. Started IMPLS Entertainment back in 2020. It was sort of like a culmination of a lot of effort put in the right ways, but like anything in life, luck is involved. We started the company right before the pandemic hit. So 2020 was a very optimistic year. I was personally coming out of leaving a full-time job in the family business. I was previously working with my father in the diamond industry. So totally not related to esports or gaming whatsoever. But the backstory is that while I was working in the diamond industry, I had started csgotoasia.com. That was a website founded by me and actually a co-founder of IMPLS, Gad Tan. Gad is the creative director of IMPLS today, but back then in 2016, we kind of started a side project. CS:GO was focused on Counter-Strike in the region. So I have a deep interest in Counter-Strike, always have been. It was the game that I started playing when I was 11 years old, right? Going to the LAN shops in Singapore. I'm sure you're familiar with that game.
Of course.
As most Singaporean males are. I think there's no such thing as a Singaporean male who's in his 30s who's never touched Counter-Strike, at least once, right? Now, what happened was I left the family business, started IMPLS Entertainment with Matthew, Harley, Gad, and myself. And the whole purpose of starting IMPLS was actually to start Paper X, the team. What we did, though, with IMPLS is we brought CS:GO to Asia as our media site under the umbrella. It was sort of to be a complementary product because we started Paper X as a Counter-Strike team. So the idea was having this Counter-Strike team, and the purpose was, can we make this team a top team? And as a byproduct of making a top team, the hope was there would be more interest in the APAC scene and APAC players within this game, which would only elevate CS:GO to Asia's brand value as well. Now, ironically, that has happened in the last 2.5 years, but not for Counter-Strike, but for Valorant. So the long story short is halfway through in 2021, Valorant came out in June of 2020, and we didn't act on it. It was a new kid on the block. It was a new game. No one really knew what the future would be, and it's a bit of a risk, right, to just dive into a new title. As a Counter-Strike team, we were looking at that with a lot of interest, and we started to notice how a lot of teams in APAC were making that transition. But the trend was more of like, if you're not good at Counter-Strike, just switch to Valorant, clean slate, fresh start, give it a go, right? But we didn't feel that need because our team was, well, we weren't as good as we are in Valorant today, but we were still a top team in Asia for Counter-Strike. Maybe just not the top 5, but like top 10 for sure. It was a struggle, though, and eventually we made the transition in February of 2021.
Right.
And that's really when things kicked off, right? When we entered, it was a bit of a struggle for sure. It wasn't just like, just because you're good at Counter-Strike means you're good at Valorant. But that's the naivety that we did have at that time. We thought, well, we're a good team, so we're going to be good. But I think at the end of the day, it did turn out that way. It just took a year plus for us to find our footing and really prove ourselves. And today we're the top team in APAC for Valorant and top 5 in the world, according to some rankings out there.
Yeah, so you pretty much left you were in the gem industry previously, and then you decided to go in esports. Now, that was, like you said, it was probably because of the love of the game.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. Then the thing is that now you're saying that you basically just took a group of friends and say, hey, let's build a team around what we think is going to be good. So how do you go around scouting for people? Did you like sit at LAN shops and just wait for people to come in and audition them? How did that work?
Yeah, that's a question I get asked a lot. And I think it makes sense. I mean, it's not a question I need to ask myself a lot, but people always wonder, how do you find talent? And I think it's a valid question, 100%. I think it starts with like when you're in the industry. When I was a player myself, our co-founders were all players as well. So it's about, that's the prerequisite, I would say. Like being a good player, you don't even have to be a good player to be honest, but like having that understanding of the game, because that already lends you the eye, what the know-how, what are you looking for, what makes a good player, right? And I think you can't do that if you don't even have any knowledge of the game.
That is true.
That's a start. Second to that, I think it's like the time, just by virtue of being, my time in CS Go to Asia as a journalist, I was traveling around Asia Pacific, even to Europe in some cases, attending tournaments. I was meeting players. I mean, I was the one interviewing them. So I started to get a really good sense of like players, their personalities, because, in any industry, right? Sports, esports, skill is one thing, but you need to have a good head on your shoulders. You need to have a certain level of professionalism behind you. You need to have, it's not so, those are soft skills that are harder to identify.
You're finding a fit.
Yeah.
So who was the first player that you found?
Okay. So when we started, it was in Counter-Strike, right?
Right.
It started with our coach, Alex.
Okay.
But at that time, he was a player. But because he was a little bit more senior, he's a bit older. Today, Alex is, I think, 32. So at that time, he was just reaching 30.
That's a weird thing. In esports, 32 is considered old.
Oh,
like,
100%. Yeah.
It's like all of a sudden.
28 is considered old.
Yeah, your fine motor skills are starting to go. I'm sorry. We got to make room for the younger ones, right?
So Alex was the first. And he sort of brought together, because we had this idea, okay, we want to start a team. And then it was like Counter-Strike. Okay, so who can we get? And Alex is someone I know, I've known for a while. And he actually approached me just as a friend. He had no idea that we had these plans. And he's like, Nick, do you know anyone? Like, we're looking for a team. And then I thought to myself, I'll be honest, and if Alex is hearing it, maybe objectively at that time, that group of guys with Alex maybe wasn't the best team we could have got. But the circumstances, everything given, they were the best. Right? In terms of they were free, they were looking for someone. We needed a good group of players. And I had experience working with them from the journalistic side, and I knew them. So it was like, okay, let's see if this can work. And luckily it did. And so that was kind of, I would say, easy because we kind of had this group of guys. And Alex really brought that knowledge and know-how of like who these players are, what they could bring to the table. So we kind of started like that. I mean, if I was to have to build a team from scratch today, I don't think it would be so dissimilar, to be honest. You got to start with one, right? If you can identify the one person that sees your vision, that understands what your goals are and what you want to accomplish with the team, that's all you need, that starting one person. And from there, you can build a team around. In esports, and that's one thing that people need to understand, gaming and esports, like esports is the competitive focus of gaming, right? It is gaming, and you have to have fun, but ultimately, you're there to win. So players have this ability to identify those other peers that have that same motivation, that drive, that seriousness, that willingness to win, and not put their differences in front of each other, and learn how, have that maturity to like, yeah, you did something wrong, let's learn from that, move on, rather than you did something wrong, you suck, like I'm never playing with you again.
That's damn toxic. Huh?
Yeah.
Sorry, man. Yeah. I can't play with people like that.
Yeah, but those people still exist.
Oh,
obviously.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So really, I mean, scouting, it starts with, it's just a matter of like knowing the scene, knowing the game. And if you know one or two people, you're already at a head start.
Right.
Yeah. Everything else is, to be honest, gimmicky. You can go on all sort of third-party websites, look at stats, leaderboards. Like, within some of the games like Dota 2, League of Legends, even Valorant, they have leaderboards. Right.
And there's gambling with that too, by the way.
Yeah.
There's online betting. I saw it.
Online betting
is
big, yeah, for sure. But with the leaderboards, it's like that's also kind of a proven way to scout, but it's still kind of like you need references. You need referrals from people. It's like, yeah, okay, this guy could be top 2, but how is he as a person? Is he toxic? Is he going to bring the team down? Is he going to put himself first before everyone else? That you'd rather not get that top 2 guy, but get the top 10 guy who has everything else.
Right.
And
like say for example, once you form the team already, there was this coverage on CNA recently. I think it was this all-girl, all-female team who was playing Mobile Legends, and all of them live in the same house, and you can see that they're building chemistry with each other and all this. is it very similar to, I mean, is that representative of many teams whereby once they get together, you force them, or at least, well, I would say that you confine them to a space to force them to storm to norm, and of course to become a very strong team. Is that how it works?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's many schools of thoughts on this, right? And we have enough experience over the last sort of, today's modern esports has only been about the last decade. Like, just a quick history lesson, like esports or competitive video gaming has been around for 3-4 decades. Think back to the arcade days, having your local arcade, Space Invaders, like having a quick tournament, $100 cash prize, winner takes all. Like, that is technically esports, right? When you have a game and you have a competitive aspect and you put like a bracket, even just like a bar, playing darts, like that could be considered esports. You know what I mean? Maybe not darts, but you understand.
Yeah.
So today's like modern esports is only a decade old. And I think in this past like decade, we've seen both options work, where you have top teams put their players in a gaming house. And like you said, it builds camaraderie, it builds team chemistry. But then I think there's a certain time where that actually ends up becoming counterproductive. Why do I say this? Is because we've also seen cases where that implodes, where they're spending too much time to each other, too much in each other's space. There's no separation between work and play and training and just having a life, right? So there's a fine balance there, because you for example, you don't see the top football teams in the world all living in one
together,
house.
yeah.
So there are other ways to spend time with each other to build chemistry, rather than just forcing teams to live in a house.
Yeah.
But again, I think it's dangerous to say like it cannot work or it can work.
Right.
It really depends on the team, the individuals, the personalities, and it has to just be right for those set of individuals.
Right.
I've seen success stories where teams play and train in the same gaming house and go on to win championships. But I've also seen the opposite.
That brings us to why we actually put this podcast together, right? It was because there were a couple of things I really wanted to understand, because I'm so bad at this, right? I'm so bad at this. There are a couple of things that I really just don't understand right now. It's like the metaverse is one, and esports is another. Because in the gaming world, my brother calls me a filthy casual. So I don't exactly know what that means, but I'll just take that I like to take my time. And
I don't necessarily know if that's a bad thing either, though. I mean, yeah.
So I really wanted to find out, like, in the world of esports, right? Number one, what does it take? You've already mentioned what it takes for somebody to get into it, that killer instinct, that winning, that yearning to win. But what is it that the kids now are asking about? Like, say, for example, I want to be an esports athlete. Why? Is it because you want to make lots of money? Yeah, that's one thing. But at the beginning, is there money in esports, to be honest, when you first start out?
Right.
Let's manage those expectations.
Sure. We'll take a bigger high level approach here first. I think it starts with first understanding the difference between gaming and esports, right? Gaming is a huge industry. It's bigger than the music and movie industry combined. Because why? Gaming includes console, mobile, PC, handheld devices. Yeah, so board gaming. So the gaming industry is massive, and today it's even growing faster than like the music and entertainment industry.
Right.
I mean, look, if your grandmother plays Candy Crush, she's a gamer. Like, by definition of the industry, she's a gamer. She's a consumer of games, so she's a gamer, right?
Congrats, Mom. You're a gamer.
Yeah, we're all gamers at the end of the day, really, if you think about it, right? If you own a mobile game or play a mobile game, even casually, you're a gamer. So by that definition, that's the gaming world.
Right.
Esports is really just I wouldn't even say the tip of the iceberg. It's like the tiny cherry on top of the iceberg. It really, like, in the industry aspect, like these industry numbers are thrown around. For example, I think the latest numbers is like the esports industry is going to grow to 2 billion by 2023. But you have to think about that, 2 billion over 350 billion, right? That's nothing. So when people say there's so much money in esports, it's kind of like yes and no. There's more and more money coming in. But objectively speaking, esports is a tiny fraction. So why does esports exist? predominantly esports exists because it is a marketing vehicle for the game developers, right? Why does Riot Games invest so much into Valorant esports and League of Legends esports? It's because they want to showcase how their game can be played at the highest level. It allows for people to aspire to get that good, right? Which ends up making people play their game more. And what you're going to end up happening in that is that, yes, there's just not room for everyone to be an esports athlete. Yeah. It's not possible. Like with anything, how many people can really aspire to be a top tennis player or a top golfer or a top football player? It's very few. And like anything, I think that's where the expectation has to start. You know, you may love golf, but are you going to be on the PGA Tour?
Yeah.
You know, it's great if you aspire to be, but there's that expectation. Same, you may love go-karting. It's an expensive hobby, but are you going to be an F1 driver one day? Sure, some people end up doing that for sure.
Well,
but
that's Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah, right. So I think it's hard to say like, no, you're not, like quash your dreams right now. That's dangerous also. But like I think there's somewhere along the line, you have to encourage that motivation, but you also have to maintain that objectivity and be realistic.
Right.
Like the chances are there. And in fact, today, the chances to be an esports athlete are even higher than in our times, right?
Because
there was no opportunities back then.
Now it's open. The
open.
Market's there. I think teams are actively looking to
all the time.
Again, because the lifespan of an esports athlete is so short.
Yeah.
There has to be a cycling and succession planning like way quick.
Yeah.
So how do you actually look at that? Like, are you looking at your roster and going, look, in 4 years, I need to look at the next phase of people. You know, like in the previous podcast I did. On leadership, succession planning was actually the number one thing when a CEO takes over. I got to already think about what the next CEO is doing while I'm doing this stuff. So likewise, in your position, or at least in the team's position, how many years before you're actually looking at who's the next one I got to bring in to groom, perhaps, or to grow?
I don't know if there's like a set time frame or anything, but I think it's kind of like an ongoing thing. You're always looking, right? Like, for example, with our coach, Alex, like even when we haven't even had any conversation about like, oh, we need a player, he will always come, hey, have you seen this guy?
Right.
Or have you heard of this guy? You know? And it doesn't mean that we're going to take action, but it's a process.
Yeah.
You're always looking. Right, because like you said, anything can happen. Also, like we may sign a team under a contract for 3 years, so we have like that surety and guarantee that they're going to be with us. But anything can happen. The player can get injured.
Yeah.
The player could just start to perform badly. Could lose motivation. They're human beings too, right?
Yes.
And nothing is a guarantee. The player could be having his peak today. You sign him, and then he plateaus and then starts dipping down. So yeah, to the long answer short is you're always looking. It's an ongoing process.
Right.
And it's not necessarily that you're looking for a whole set of guys. It's more likely you're just looking at individuals, because how you fit the individual in is really, you can't pre-decide that.
Yeah.
You know,
Agreed.
You have to just see at the time when and where you have the need, whether they fit, whether they don't fit.
I saw in this documentary with what I think it was Team Liquid. They've got physiotherapists, they've got chiropractors, they've got meditation and fitness guys coming in.
Yeah.
So it's a real full-on kind of service that's required to support the growth of these athletes.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, to answer your question quickly, what else we're looking for is today, in this day and age, it's even more important your personal brand becomes a factor as well, right? Because what is esports at the end of the day? It's entertainment. We're in the entertainment business, you know, same with sports. And having a good personality, marketability is also important. I would say 5 years ago, maybe that was less important, but each year going forward is becoming more important. Why? Because social media, right? And the bread and butter of esports and entertainment is your public image and your public facing ability. And that's, you know, on the business side of things, a lot of our business model comes from sponsorship. So for the players themselves too, you know, like with athletes in sports, getting endorsement deals with brands.
Right.
Brand will not support you if you don't have an audience.
That
right?
is true.
Brand will support you based on your competitive accolades, but then that kind of dries up to an extent. So what are you going to do when you're not a champion anymore?
Yeah.
You know, what are you going to do if you don't have an audience? And so that's a factor for us too, because that allows us to sell sponsorships as well.
Yeah.
And I think aside from that, it's also just like your fans need someone to get behind. So that's why it's important. I wouldn't stress on like you need this many followers, but are you likable to the fans? Because how do fans discover the team? They start by resonating with an individual, right? And you know, for the most part, that starts if the individual is good. Like, why do people like LeBron? Because he's the GOAT,
right?
You know. But at the same time, he's got his own personality and his own brand as well. So that's what he has going for him. But let's be honest, like he wouldn't be so popular if he wasn't so good. That's just how it starts. Like, right? Why did people like Jordan back in the days? Why did people like Tiger Woods when he was on the up and up?
Right.
It's because they were game changers. They were showing that they were so good at their discipline, and you can't help but fall in love with that, right?
That is true.
So
everybody loves a winner, right?
Right, of course.
Do you actually have to teach them how to, or coach them on how to communicate with each other?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, your hope is that when you recruit the team member, they already have some experience. Like you wouldn't recruit someone who has no experience, right? So there's some level of basic fundamentals that they should already know. And every game has those nuances, how you communicate, short form, map call outs, you know, agent abilities, etc. But when you're on a pro team, the coach will have to spend certain time, and sometimes the coach will have to spend time on individuals more than the whole team, depending on who needs it more or whatever.
Right.
And the type of things that you would in terms of communication, the type of things that you would like look at are mostly, you know, game specific, or even just like how the team, what's the SOP of the team, right? Because every team over time organically builds their own understanding of things. There's no like universal way that teams communicate,
right?
You know?
Agreed.
They have all these various nuances, and then that's kind of where the coaching comes in as well, to make that a little bit more efficient. First, you let the organic stuff. First, you let the organic stuff flourish, right? And then you take what works and what's efficient, and you create your system around that. Okay.
Now tracking back to the athlete progression, when you hire them, you build them up, you train them, you get them forged, or at least the team gets forged and formed together, right? So the now for your current team, right, is that they are champions. They're at that level. You know, you were saying number 1 in Asia, 5th in the world for Valorant.
Yeah.
Right. So amazing accolades there. So what will you be, or at least what do you want to build for them in the future? Is it more of like what you mentioned, more endorsement deals for them? Do you need to develop them in those areas to become players and personalities in that sense? Do you need to create some sort of social media following for them? Create some sort of story arc? You know, what, like a career progression for an athlete? Is that how does that gonna pan out?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, and this is something I don't necessarily think of it from the company's responsibility, but also just like as a personal agenda, right? Because it's always been, for someone like me and for our co-founders who've been there since the beginning, we've seen like that after a certain point, you rightly mentioned, esports athletes' careers are very short. And it's worrying because in order for our industry to be sustainable for the long term, there needs to be more options for esports athletes post-playing, you know? So what we've done in our team with PaperX internally is we've tried, you know, I think it starts with just doing things at a small scale to understand, can it work? Can it not work? What are the requirements? Perfect example is Alex, our coach, right? He was a player. We transitioned him to a coach. I wouldn't go out to say that we did the most amazing job. I think it was at the beginning a little bit of a struggle for us and for Alex, because it was kind of like we threw him in the deep end.
Right.
We just said, "Hey, you're the coach now."
Right.
There was no real, you know, program or curriculum that we could like develop. This has all been developed over the last 2 years, just by trial and error. Right. And luckily it worked out. And I think today, I would say Alex has proven himself as a coach. He's gotten the team to where they are. So I can't say he's doing anything wrong.
Right.
But is he doing the best job? I think that's anybody's guess. Because being a coach in esports is also a very new thing. It's like I said, today's modern esports has only been around for about 10 years. So the best coaches out there have only been around for 10 years.
Right. And so the playbook hasn't been written yet.
Correct. There's no real.
But where do you draw all this from? Like, say, for example, if you look at soccer coaches, for example, right? Jose Mourinho is very, very good at his pep talks. He's famous for that. You got Pep Guardiola, who's an amazing tactician, right? And if you got some others who who started as players to become managers, and some have even become assistant managers or assistant coaches. Do you think that there's going to be a youth system as well? I'm just pulling it out of the whole soccer leagues and how they develop their talent. Do you think that that's what the future of esports is going to be like?
I'd hope so, to be honest. Like, I think there's lots of room for that. We've barely scratched the surface. Like today's, in places like, in the markets like North America, for example, you are starting to see collegiate esports, even high school teams. Yeah. Right? Yeah. But nothing has sort of formally been created. And I think that's okay also. Like, let it develop organically and let the system come up with what makes sense. Because it doesn't mean that just because traditional sports like football, baseball, basketball, where you have the very regimented, like, you cannot be an NBA player if you haven't gone through like high school varsity drafts, then college, and then you just can't, right? And with esports, it's open. You can be this like diamond in the rough somewhere and be discovered and just be on the pro team tomorrow. That can happen, and I think that is a good thing too. The minute you start systemizing it, you're marginalizing a lot of people, right? And the other beauty about esports is that it's not a physical thing. So someone who has certain disabilities, for example, can still be an esports pro, technically, So it's dangerous also for us to say this is how it has to be. Right. You have to go from junior to college to pro. I think it's not necessary for us to build the exact same model that sports. I think esports has this opportunity to really build what makes sense for esports, because, like I said, there are going to be certain limitations, and I think there is definitely room for more regulation and professionalism. But again, over-regulation, we've seen what happens in sports, right? That also can be a problem. It lends to corruption, it lends to whatever, abuse of regulations, and et cetera, et cetera. So, the pathways, I think, are still not fully defined. But I think it will really come to fruition once we start to see more and more examples of successful players building a career, which when people will start to see, okay, this works. Yeah. This makes sense. We're still a bit early now. There's not that many examples. Like, we're just reaching the phase now where you're starting to see top esports athletes put up their mouse and keyboard and move on to the next thing. That's only happening like now. So a few more years from now, I think we'll have a better answer on that.
And so far, right, I'm curious, what has been that next thing for some of the esports players? Maybe some examples would be good.
Okay. So I would say some examples are like streamers, right? They end up hanging their competitive side of things and go into full-time streaming. That's very lucrative if you're a big streamer. You look at people like Shroud, for example. He's in North America. He's a huge streamer, but he was a ex-Counter-Strike professional before. Other examples, like we mentioned already, coach, manager. But again, that's not as defined. It's harder for people to understand how you go from being a coach to, a player to a coach, or a player to a manager. Some players end up not leaving gaming, but go into more mainstream entertainment. So becoming a YouTuber, right, where you're talking not just about gaming, but all sorts of things. But again, it's hard to define because it really depends on the individual and what their passions and motivations are, right? But I would say those are sort of if I could pick for a pro player point of view, becoming a streamer, a coach, or a manager is like the most obvious. But again, some cases players have diplomas or degrees in a certain discipline,
Right.
and can they, if they still have like passion or interest in that area of study, but they happen to be a pro player, can they sort of somehow merge that? Because the business side of esports, there's still requirements for
many.
And I've seen cases. Our co-founder Harley, he was an ex Counter-Strike player, and a lot of his peers from his time have also gone on to leadership roles in esports organizations.
Right.
Aside from that, I've seen ex-players becoming having leadership roles in like hardware companies, right? They understand what the needs are, so they go and help design mice or keyboards or headsets. Even people getting involved in the game, designing of the game, designing of maps, strategy within the game. So there are a lot of opportunities, I would say, but it's really up to the individual to put themselves in front of that opportunity
and to pursue that as well. But my question is, are these options laid out in front of them? Because my question is always, whenever you go into something, naturally you won't know everything you need to know.
Of course.
But are there these things? Because again, like what you mentioned, I'm thinking like a dad again, right? If my kid wants to go into esports, I have to already know that this isn't something that's going to last him till he's 26, 27, or if by some freak accident he's got carpal tunnel, right? Because of mouse injuries or whatever it is.
Oh,
right?
totally, yeah.
And what's going to happen then? So this is where that knowledge comes in, to be able to tell him, hey, look, if you love the industry, you don't have to leave it. Be part of that ecosystem. Be part of it, and surround yourself with the same kind of people. And just, when it's time to hang it up, you got to hang it up. But doesn't mean you can't, you have to leave the whole industry.
Yeah, you absolutely don't. I mean, I hear where you're coming from,
because that's what happens, right? They think that, it's over for me.
That's also because it's like, I would stress to say, like, Singaporean specific mindset is like, you have to have everything. This needs to be a clear path for the next 30 years.
Yeah,
that kind of thing. But I would just maybe answer this question with lending a little bit of my own personal journey. I also wanted to be a pro player. I mean, today, if I could trade places with one of our players on the team, I would do it in a heartbeat. That's the honest to God truth.
Why?
Why? Because like that feeling of playing on stage and winning and lifting a trophy, it's like, I would say that's still a dear personal motivation of mine, and why I'm running this team together with my co-founders. We've talked about this before, like, guys, would you want to play on stage if you could? Oh yeah, hell yeah, but we're also mature enough, objective enough to realize like that's not going to happen for us.
Yeah.
So instead of doing it by playing ourselves, we created a team so that we can experience that ourselves, right? It's in a different way. So I think it starts with having that open mind. You can get to your desired dream, but it doesn't have to be linear. Right. And most of the time, honestly, it's never linear.
Are you kidding me?
Right. There's no such thing. So that would be the sort of like higher level thought process, right? I think after that, it's really like, you may feel like you're going to be left without a job after you're playing, but while you're in that journey, you don't know what's going to happen. Doors open all the time while you're in the journey, while you're playing. Like, from my own experience, I actually gave up gaming after NS. I went to college, and I told myself I was never really good at school. I always put school behind gaming, and what did gaming get me? I was on that mindset, right? So I went to college, and I actually did really well in college. My parents were really happy, blah, blah, blah. I was like, yeah, wow, Nikhil, you finally are good at academics. And I was like, well, that's kind of a no-brainer because I never...
Finally? Wow. Asian guild. Yeah. That's top tier. Okay.
Asian guild,
Love
right?
It.
But it also was like an internal validation, like made me feel like, yeah, I never really was dumb. I was always a smart guy. I just didn't prioritize studies. I was prioritizing gaming. But then in my 20s, I was like, well, that's not really going to get me anywhere. I should get back to studies and be a bit more realistic. But you know what ended up happening through that is that gaming and that regret was always there. That desire to get back into gaming was always there. I couldn't ignore it. It was always part of me, you know, and that ended up being where I am today, right? Like I went through that journey. I did the whole traditional thing. I joined the family business. I was a good Indian son. I did my part, my responsibility, but then I had to have a real honest talk with myself. Am I enjoying this? Do I see myself doing this for the rest of my life? And from my heart of hearts, I couldn't say yes. You know, you can't force that.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't easy. It was like friction with me and my father for 5.5 years.
Wow.
Right? But I powered through that. And in fact, today, my relationship with my father is better than it ever has been, even when I was a teenager.
Right.
Because I'm doing what I love.
Uh-huh.
It shows in my energy, in my, you know, when you're doing what you love and you love yourself for doing that, you have more love to give to your family, to your friends, to everybody. And so even for my father, he was not happy that I left. But now that he's seeing, because I love what I do and I'm getting success out of it, he can't help but feel happy for me, proud of me, you know? So it was a long journey, but the point I'm trying to make here is that you got to love what you do. You got to be open-minded. And I think as a parent, all you can do is encourage your child to find what it is that they love.
Right.
That's it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is such great advice to give, right? And a fantastic mindset. And just something to add on to where you're at, you know, about winning that championship one more time kind of thing, you know, being on stage. Just yesterday, I heard this, that the coaches were actually talking to their players, right, their athletes, and saying that in your lifetime, you've only got one lifetime to be a champion once, right? That's basically it, because you're only doing this one sport, so you'll always be that champion for the rest of your life. For us as coaches, we take on a new batch of players or batch of athletes. We bring them and win that championship with them, so we can be champions many times over. Whereas you've only got that one time. So it's a little bit different in that sense. But
that's a good one, yeah.
It is. It's amazing because you get to see it from both sides of it. You know, as an athlete, that is it. But in your position, you have the chance to say, oh, good Lord, this chair. It's scaring the hell out of me. Anyway, gotta lose some weight. The coaches now have this chance to go, hey, we really can win so many championships. Let's look for the next one. Let's look for the next one. You know, there's longevity. It's a long game. Yeah. So it's a little different, isn't it?
It totally is, yeah. I mean, like you rightly pointed out, for us, when we started this team, and I may have this personal desire, like I want to lift a trophy with the team, but today it's Valorant. Tomorrow we expand to different games. We can lift trophies in all those different games. I mean, that would be the hope and the wish, of course, is to win championships. And I think also for the coach point of view, like you said, I see it with our coach Alex as well. It took him a while to sort of detach from, oh man, I never really got to achieve what I wanted as a player. But I think he's also starting to realize now that he has this opportunity to lift the trophy as the coach. You know, and it's become his new motivation, his new desire.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's really awesome stuff. And one last thing that I really want to ask as well is about the athletes, right? Now it's become a requirement for them to, again, like what we talked about, being a personality. What does that mean? Media training, speaking skills, ability to sell merch, understanding e-commerce platforms. You know, what's that kind of additional knowledge or extracurriculars that you have to give them now?
I think everything you mentioned, pretty much.
And more, I'm sure.
And more, yeah. I mean,
give me the secret sauce. I got to do that for myself too. Give me the secret sauce, man.
Winning is definitely a helping factor.
I'll try.
In the realm of esports, the fact that they're winning definitely accelerates that, right? But yes, media training, just like understanding social media to an extent. Like, you don't necessarily need the players to know the true industry best practices for social media, But like, do they even have a presence? Let's just start with that. Like, gamers can be, like, I'm generalizing here, but generally introverted, which is why they're in front of the computer and gaming, right? But if you happen to be an extroverted person, use that to your advantage. Don't hide, express, go out there. And then some people are just naturally better at this than others. Even when you're streaming, they're more engaging with their fans and et cetera, or they're more entertaining, whatever. But again, that's very subjective. I don't know how much of that can be truly trained. But you can do certain things to find your niche and find your sort of differentiating point. Like, I'll give an example of one of our players, Jing. He's one of the best players in the world. But nobody knew him a year ago, right? And that's not necessarily his fault or anything. He came on our team in November last year. And since then, we as a team have improved and gone international. But if we hadn't, I think still people wouldn't know who Jing is. Right? So, but then Jing is a very shy individual and is actually very reluctant to go in front of the camera and stuff. But I think over time, as he saw that he had no choice in that. I mean, being a professional, you're under contract. And in the contract, there are certain things you just have to, that you're obligated to do, like talk to the media. Right? And just, lots of media attention, videos, photos. So you kind of forced to be comfortable with the camera.
What did y'all do to get him comfortable? This is very interesting to me. We're doing this right now. And to me, it's a big thing because a lot of people don't realize how difficult it is. Yes, I'm pointing at you, okay, whoever is watching. It's difficult to get the idea or get the feeling of wanting to be on camera or pretending that thing doesn't exist.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard for me to say because I've never really experienced that, like, hesitancy. But if I can think back to the first few times I ever did, of course you're nervous, or of course you're reluctant because everyone's a little bit conscious about their image or whatever, like want to put their best foot forward, etc. I don't think we did anything specifically, to be honest. We just kept reminding Jing, like, look, if you don't want to, it's okay. But at some point, you're going to have to do these things more and more. Because today, we can control our relationship with our player. If our player tells us he doesn't want to do something for our own content, we have the power to choose whether we accept that or not. But once the external parties that we sign deals with, our sponsors, you have less leverage or negotiating power there. And when people realize that, as a business, like, you cannot run your business without the support of these the tournaments, the sponsors. So it's kind of like, like, you have no choice here.
You got to appease the stakeholders, right?
Right, exactly.
Right, and get good at it. That's the thing.
Yeah. I mean, it first starts with being able to do it, and then later you learn to improve and be better. But the challenge, I think, with young players is also just getting them to accept and understand, hey, you want to be pro, you want to be paid all this money and get prize money, have fun, play the game, but understand that it comes with these added responsibilities,
right?
Yeah,
and that's going to be that is the difference as well, right? Like, to have X number of eyeballs just watching you do something for 30 minutes to an hour and constant focus on everything that you're doing. That's an immense amount of pressure to be under. Yeah,
exactly. But it's like practice makes perfect, Over time, the more you do it, you are able to just pretend that doesn't exist. And I mean, how else can you, like, anyone who has, like, actors, if an actor was always thinking about how many millions of people are going to watch them, they would be crippled all the time. You have to learn. I think that's a mental practice that you have to develop to separate, to detach yourself from that thought altogether.
To be in a state of flow and freedom. Not to be able to think that, oh, this person's watching me or that person. I'm just going into it and being there, being present, right? That's one of the most difficult things. Like, do you actually do, like, moving meditations with your team or something like that to have some sort of, like, what is that? Some awareness exercises or being present, mindfulness exercises.
Yeah, I mean, I don't personally. We experimented with it a while back with our old roster. I think it's not like it's necessary. Again, it comes down to the individuals. If they're able to do and perform without doing those things, then you have to ask yourself, how much added benefit would it bring? Of course, I'm not debunking saying that it's useless or anything. I personally meditate as much as I can. I like to meditate more, but it's really on a personal need case basis, I think. And I'm sure if it was part of the routine, like that we like sort of discipline, added that discipline factor, you have to do this mindful exercise like every day or every other day, I'm sure it would improve. But it's like, how do we know, right? At this point, at the end of the day, it's also dangerous. You can't keep forcing the team to do things, unless then they're just going to default to, is it in the contract, right? And it's in their right also to do that, right? If it's not listed out in black and white, then why do they have to do it?
Agreed.
So it's a bit of give and take there.
Agreed. And this has been so fascinating to hear about your transition from dealing with gems, jewelry, to getting into esports, and not just being a player, but also founding a team.
Yeah.
And, from publications to actual players. Now you've got man management, you've got a coach, you've got a full set of staff, you're winning competitions. What's next for you?
Well, we're winning competitions, but we haven't won anything in the international stage yet. So I think for me, immediate goal is that next year we are moving the team to Korea as part of the Riot partnered franchise system. There's 10 teams in APAC, 10 teams in Europe, and 10 teams in America. So the big sort of goal of this year was to get accepted into that partnership program, and we did. So what's immediately next is 2023 is looking like a bright year for us, being part of that league system. It's kind of like a premier league of Valorant. I think, the first goal would to be win a championship. That's definitely on top of our cakes. But beyond that, we're trying to grow the PaperX brand and be a formidable team, not just in Valorant, but for all of esports within Southeast Asia. Our focus has always been on Southeast Asia. And I think if we can turn this team into being sort of the, we started with this kind of loose vision of being the team that other teams aspire to be. And so that's still kind of in our DNA, right? The proof is always in the pudding. And that's what we aspire to be. Like, less talk, more walk, Just do what you say you're going to do and let everything else unfold from there.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And, you're a busy guy, so I know I've only got this much time with you. All right. Before we go, there's always 10 questions I always ask all my guests. Okay. All right. It's rapid fire. But, when I say rapid fire, you can actually take your time. It's perfectly fine.
Okay, sure.
Okay. So this is Nick with the Epic Questionnaire. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. One word that you love the most.
Ooh. That's a hard one. One word that I love the most. Discipline.
One word you really dislike.
Moist.
You're not the first person to say this.
This one is easier to answer than love the most.
Yeah, moist. Yeah, right.
It's just a weird word.
Okay, yeah. Okay. And if you could have a conversation with anyone, dead or alive, fictional, non-fictional, who would that be?
Oh. Actually, I would say my grandma. I never met her.
Oh.
She passed away very young.
I see.
But yeah, that would be interesting.
You'd want to find out about life back then?
Yeah, just everything, like, and family history and all. It feels like it's a bit of a void in my life, Not that it bothers me or anything, but...
Oh, it's something you'll probably track back to one of these days.
Yeah.
I'm pretty certain. And what do you say to yourself in the morning?
I say, oh, shit. Here we go again. No. What do I say to myself in the morning? Usually, it's usually just like thankful and gratefulness that I'm alive and things are, like,
That's so good.
yeah, it's actually that pretty simple.
That's really good.
Yeah.
That's really good. Name a superpower that you'd like to have.
Oh, I've always wanted to fly, I think, like Superman.
Why?
Because you could go anywhere, anytime. You're not limited to anything, really.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What's your favorite dish to eat?
My favorite dish? Oh, this is too hard, man. There's no like favorite. I could pick a cuisine. How about that?
Oh, sure.
Japanese.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. And favorite travel spot?
Wow.
Or the next one to go to?
The next one to go to, I've always wanted to go to Antarctica.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
My parents actually went to Antarctica. I'm so jealous. Like a couple of years ago on an expedition cruise thing. Yeah. So for me, that would be.
Yeah, see, you get out of the gem industry. This is what happens to you. You don't get to go to Antarctica.
I don't get to go to Antarctica.
It's on you, my friend. It's on you. All right. Name something in the arts that you've always wanted to do, but you haven't done it yet.
I've always wanted to be like a rock star. I play drums, but again, this comes back to before where it's like if you don't really love the process, then you have no business being. But like in a different life, rock star, man.
Right. In like a C-182, you'd
Yeah.
be somewhere else, right? Rick and Morty reference.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Let's see. What does retirement look like to you?
What does retirement look like to me? I mean, hopefully I'm content. Everything in life that I wanted to accomplish, I accomplished. I've got a beautiful family. I don't think I would be doing nothing. People are like, oh, I'm just be on a beach sipping pina coladas. Nah, I always wanted to be doing something, but I think, retirement for me, successful retirement would be like I can basically go anywhere and do anything, and I'm healthy.
Nice.
Yeah.
And how do you want to be remembered? What's your legacy?
Wow, these are all really
Existential questions, right?
Yes.
It gets harder, right, as you go along. Yeah. But this is the last one.
How do I want to be remembered?
Yeah.
Ah.
Is the whole what do you want written on your gravestone question.
Oh. Okay, I wouldn't answer it as what I want written on my gravestone, but I guess I would hope that people remember me for having an impact, for enabling something or the other, having an impact. I have this tattooed on my forearm, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Try not to be a man of success, but rather be a man of value.
Mm.
It's an Albert Einstein quote, actually.
Okay.
And I got this tattoo when I was 25. I'm almost 35 now. And I still, I wake up every day, I see this. It's just a gentle reminder to always bring value to life. And success is arbitrary.
That is nice. I'm going to tell my son about that.
Yeah.
Tell him, brush your teeth. So you never forget.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was the Epic Questionnaire. 10 questions with Nick today on Edric Pudding Company. So again, thank you so much for joining us for the podcast. And, to our listeners out there, is there anything that you'd like to let them know before we sign off?
Oh, just thank you for listening. Follow us on, socials, PPRX team. My name is Nikhil, and thank you, Edric. It's been great.
All right, that was a lot of fun. So we're going to see you next time on the Epic podcast. So with that, we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, cool. Thanks. Let's
Awesome.
take a quick screen